and welcome to another chapter of reading. As you can see, we are 3/4 of the way done with the series. It is such a monumental mark, so it's another celebratory chapter. Again, I want to thank you all for your support thus far. It means a lot to me because I have such fun doing this, and I honestly hope you continue to support me in my future projects. But that's for the future. As for today, Potter. So let's get started, shall we? Chapter 18, Birthday Surprises. Why this couldn't wait until 2 weeks, I don't know. But onto the chapter. The next day, Harry confided in both Ron and Hermione the test that Dumbledore had set, though separately, for Hermione still refused to remain in Ron's presence longer than it took to give him a contemptuous look. Ron thought Harry was unlikely to have any trouble with Slughorn at all. "He loves you," he said over breakfast, leaving an airy forkful of fried egg. Won't refuse you anything, would he? Not his little potions, Prince. Just hang back after class this afternoon and ask him. Hermione, however, took a gloomier view. "He must be determined to hide what really happened, if Dumbledore couldn't get it out of him," she said in a low voice, as they stood in the deserted, snowy courtyard at break. Horcruxes. Horcruxes. I've never even heard of them." "You haven't?" Harry was disappointed. He hoped that Hermione might have been able to give him a clue as to what Horcruxes were. "It must be really advanced dark magic." On point, Hermione, as always. "But why would Voldemort have wanted to know about them? I think it's going to be difficult to get the information, Harry. You'll have to be very careful about how you approach Slughorn. Think out a strategy." "Ron reckons I should just hang back after potions this afternoon." "Oh, well, if Ron thinks that, you'd better do that," she said, pouring up more. "After all, when has Ron's judgment ever been faulty? Hermione, can't you—" "No!" she said angrily and stormed away, leaving Harry alone and ankle deep in snow. Be lucky it's not stomach deep, Harry. Potions lessons were uncomfortable enough these days. Seeing as Harry, Ron, and Hermione had to share a desk. Today, Hermione moved her cauldron around the table so that she was close to Ernie, and ignored both Harry and Ron. "What have you done?" Ron muttered to Harry, looking at Hermione's haughty profile. But before Harry could answer, Slughorn was calling for silence from the front of the room. Settle down, please. Quickly now. Lots of work to get through this afternoon. Gallipot's third law. You can tell me, but Miss Granger can, of course." Hermione recited at top speed. "Gallipot's third law states that the antidote for preventive poison will be equal to more than the sum of the antidotes for each of the separate components." I hope that was fast enough for you. "Precisely," beamed Slughorn. 10 points for Gryffindor. Now, if we accept Gallipot's third law as true..." Harry was going to have to take Slughorn's word for it that Gallipot's third law was true, because he had not understood any of it. Nobody apart from Hermione seemed to be following what Slughorn said next either. "Which means, of course, that assuming we have achieved the correct identification of the potion's ingredients by Scarpin's Rebella spell, our primary aim is not the relatively simple one of selecting antidotes to those ingredients in and of themselves, but to find that added component that will, by an almost alchemical process, transform these separate elements." Ron was sitting beside Harry with his mouth half open, doodling absently on his new copy of Advanced Potion Making. "I feel you, Ron. I completely feel you. I would draw too, but not in a book. I would print some spare parchment for that." Ron kept forgetting that he could no longer rely on Hermione to help him out of trouble when he failed to grasp what was going on. Yeah, I'd probably be in the same boat, Ron. I'd probably be in the same boat because, well, easily distracted, welcome to ADHD. It's part of my neurodivergence. Both a strength and a weakness sometimes, but, you know, I make it work. Anyway, on to the chapter. And so, finished Slughorn, I want each of you to come and take one of these files from my desk. You are to create an antidote for the poison within it before the end of the lesson. Good luck, and don't forget your protective gloves. Hermione left her stool and was halfway towards Slughorn's desk before the rest of the class realized it was time to move. And by the time Harry, Ron, and Ernie returned to the table, she had already tipped the contents of her file into her cauldron and was kindling a fire underneath it. It's a shame the prince won't be able to help you much with this, Harry, she said brightly as she straightened up. You have to understand the principles involved this time. No shortcuts or cheats. Annoyed, Harry uncorked the poison he had taken from Slughorn's desk, which was a garish shade of pink, tipped it into his cauldron, and with a fire underneath it. He didn't have the faintest idea of what he was supposed to do next. He glanced around at Ron, who was now standing there looking rather harmless, having copied everything Harry had done. I'm sure the prince hasn't got any tips, Ron muttered to Harry. Harry pulled out his trusty copy of Advanced Potion Making and turned to the chapter on antidotes. There was Gilderoy's third law, stated word for word as Hermione had recited it. But not a single illuminating note in the prince's hand to explain what it meant. Apparently the prince, like Hermione, had no difficulty understanding it. Nothing, said Harry gloomily. Hermione was now waving her wand enthusiastically over her cauldron. Unfortunately, they could not copy the spell she was doing because she was now so good at nonverbal incantations that she didn't need to say the words aloud. Ernie Macmillan, however, was muttering, Specialist for Fabio, over his cauldron, which sounded impressive, so Harry and Ron hastened to imitate him. It only took Harry 5 minutes to realize that his reputation as the best potion maker in the class was crashing around his ears. Slughorn had peered hopefully into his cauldron on his first circuit of the dungeon, preparing to exclaim in delight as he usually did, and instead had withdrawn his head hastily, coughing, as the smell of bad eggs overwhelmed him. Yeah, no. Nope. That is definitely not a lavender candle. Hermione's expression could not have been any more mocking. She had well been performed in every potions class. She was now decanting the mysteriously separated ingredients of her poison into 10 different vials, more to avoid watching this irritating sight than anything else. Harry bent over to the Half-Blood Prince's book and turned a few pages with unnecessary force. And there it was, scrawled right across the long list of antidotes, to shove a bozo down their throats. Foreshadowing! Harry stared at these words for a moment. Hadn't he once, long ago, heard of Bozars? Hadn't Snape mentioned them in their first ever potions lesson? A stone taken from my stomach. Of a goat, which will protect from most poisons. It was not an answer to the Galloput problem, and had Snape still been their teacher, Harry would not have dared do it, but this was a moment for desperate measures. He hastened toward the store cupboard and rummaged within it, pushing aside unicorn horns and tangles of dried herbs, until he found, at the very back, a small cardboard box, on which had been scribbled the word Beaux-Arts. He opened the box just as Slughorn called, 2 minutes left, everyone! Inside were half a dozen of shriveled brown objects. Looking more like dried up kidneys than real stones. Harry seized one, put the box back in the cupboard, and hurried back to his cauldron. Time's up! Called Slughorn genially. Let's see how you've done. Please, what have you got for me? Slowly, Slughorn moved around the room, examining the various antidotes. Nobody had finished the task, although Hermione was trying to cram a few more ingredients into her bottle before Slughorn reached her. Ron had given up completely and was merely trying to avoid breathing in the putrid fumes issuing from his cauldron. Harry stood there waiting, the Beaux-Arts clutched in a slightly sweaty hand. Slughorn reached their table at last. He sniffed Ernie's potion and passed on to Ron's with a grimace. He did not linger over Ron's cauldron, but backed away swiftly, retching slightly. Yeah, me too, Slughorn. I would do that same thing, because nope. And you, Harry, he said, what have you got to show me? Harry held out his hand, the Beaux-Arts sitting on his palm. Slughorn looked down at it for a full 10 seconds. Okay, 1, 2, you know what, yeah. Okay, that was probably a little more than 10 seconds, but you got the concept. Harry wondered for a moment whether he was going to shout at him. Then he threw back his head and roared with laughter. You've got nerve, boy, he boomed, taking the Beaux-Arts and holding it up so that the class could see it. Okay, this is an actual stone from our driveway, but just use your imagination, please. I figured it would be small enough to jam down someone's throat, so again, just use your imagination. Oh, you're like your mother! Well, I can't fault you. A Beaux-Arts would certainly act as an antidote to all these potions. Hermione, who was sweaty-faced and had soot on her nose, looked livid. Her half-finished antidote, comprising 52 ingredients, including a chunk of her own hair, potion danger alert? I think hairs and potions, like your actual hair in a potion, would be like a ingest hazard, kind of like food on a, like if you ever came across a fly in soup or a hair on plate or it's whatever that's not food on the plate or in the dish, I think that would be like, that would probably be something like that. So again, I'm calling this potion hazard. I may be looking too much into it, but I just think that it screams potion hazard to me, okay? I watch cooking shows in my spare time, if I'm not reading. Moving on. Bubbled sluggishly behind Slughorn, who had eyes for nobody but Harry. And you thought of a Beaux-Arts by yourself, did you, Harry? She asked through gritted teeth. That's the individual spirit a real potion maker needs, said Slughorn happily, before Harry could reply. Just like his mother, they had the same intuitive perhaps of potion making. It's undoubtedly from Lily. He gets it. Yes, Harry, yes. If you got a bozo to hand, of course that would do the trick. Although, as they don't work on everything and are pretty rare, it's still worth knowing how to mix antidotes. The only person in the room looking angrier than Hermione was Malfoy, who Harry was pleased to see had spilled something that looked like cat sick all over himself. That would. My catastrophe has a habit of throwing up, so I know firsthand what it looks like, and just imagining that on Draco. Oh, I would have loved to see that in the films. Before either of them could express their fury that Harry had come top of the class by not doing any work, however, the bell rang. Time to pack up, said Slughorn, and an extra 10 points to Gryffindor for your cheek. Still chuckling, he waddled back to his desk at the front of the dungeon. Harry dawdled behind, taking an inordinate amount of time to do up his bag. Neither Ron nor Hermione wished him luck as they left. Both looked rather annoyed. At last, Harry and Slughorn were the only two left in the room. Come on now, Harry, you'll be late for your next lesson, said Slughorn affably, snapping the gold clasp shut on his dragon skin briefcase. So, said Harry, reminding himself irresistibly of Voldemort. I wanted to ask you something. Ask away then, my dear boy, ask away. Sir, I wondered what you know about Horcruxes. Slughorn froze. His round face seemed to sink in upon itself. He licked his lips and said hoarsely, What did you say? I asked whether you know anything about Horcruxes, sir. You see, Dumbledore put you up to this, whispered Slughorn. His voice had changed completely. It was not genial anymore, but shocked, terrified. He fumbled in his breast pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, mopping his sweating brow. Dumbledore showed you that memory. Well, hasn't he? Yes, said Harry, deciding on the spot that it was best not to lie. Yes, of course, said Slughorn quietly, still dabbing at his white face. Of course. Well, if you see that memory, Harry, you'll know that I don't know anything. Anything, he repeated the word forcefully, about Horcruxes. He seized his dragon skin briefcase, stuffed his handkerchief back in his pocket, and marched to the dungeon door. Sir, said Harry desperately, I just thought there might be a bit more to the memory. Did you? Said Slughorn. Then you were wrong, weren't you? Wrong! He bellowed the last word, and before Harry could say another word, slammed the dungeon door behind him. Neither Ron nor Hermione was at all sympathetic when Harry told them of this disastrous interview. I would be, so here's a hug, Harry. Ron was resentful that Harry hadn't slipped him a bozo too. Well, just wait, Ron. Just wait. It would have been just so stupid if we both done it, said Harry irritably. Look, I had to try and soften him up so I could ask him about Voldemort, didn't I? Oh, will you get a grip? He added in exasperation as Ron winced at the sound of the name. Infuriated by his failure and by Ron and Hermione's attitudes, Harry brooded for the next few days over what to do about Slughorn. He decided that for the time being he would let Slughorn think he had forgotten all about Horcruxes. It was surely best to lull him into a false sense of security before returning to the attack. When Harry did not question Slughorn again, the potions master reverted to his usual affectionate treatment of him, and appeared to have put the matter from his mind. Harry waited an invitation to one of his little evening parties, determined to accept this time, even if he had to reschedule Quidditch practice. Unfortunately, however, no such invitation arrived. Harry checked with Hermione and Ginny. Neither of them had received an invitation, and nor, as far as they knew, had anybody else. Harry could not help wondering whether this meant that Slughorn was not quite as forgetful as he appeared, simply determined to give Harry no additional opportunities to question him. Meanwhile, the Hogwarts library had failed Hermione for the first time in living memory. She was so shocked she even forgot that she was annoyed at Harry for his trick with the Beaux-Arts. "I haven't found one single explanation of what Horcruxes do," she told him. "Not a single one! I've been right through the restricted section, and even in the most horrible books, where they tell you how to brew the most gruesome potions. Ugh. Nothing! All I could find was this, and the introduction to Magic Most Evil. Listen, of the Horcrux, the wickedest of magical invention is, we shall not speak nor give direction. I mean, what mention it then?" she said impatiently, slamming the old book shut. It let out a ghostly wail. "Shut up!" she snapped, stuffing it back into her bag. The snow melted around the school as February arrived. Ooh, I wish it were February. But at the same time, I'm happy it's July, so double-edged sword. To be replaced by a cold, dreary witness. Purplish-gray clouds hung low over the castle, and the constant fall of chilly rain made the lawn slippery and muddy. No! Why do you return to torment me? I really don't like mud. I really, really, really do not like mud. If you've been here throughout the whole reading thus far, you know I do not like mud. The upshot of this was that the 6th year's first apparition lessons, which was scheduled for a Saturday morning so that no normal lessons would be missed, took place in the Great Hall instead of in the grounds. When Harry and Hermione arrived in the hall, Rod had come down with Lavender. They found that the tables had disappeared. Rain lashed against the high windows, and the enchanted ceiling swirled darkly above them as they assembled in front of Professors McGonagall, Snape, Flitwick, and Sprout, the heads of houses, to Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff, respectively, and a small wizard whom Harry took to be the apparition instructor from the Ministry, who was oddly colorless, with transparent eyelashes, wispy hair, and an insubstantial air, as though a single gust of wind might blow him away. Harry wondered whether constant disappearances and reappearances had somehow diminished his substance, or whether this frail build was ideal for anyone wishing to vanish. "Good morning," said the Ministry Wizard, when all the students had arrived and the heads of houses had called for quiet. "My name is Wilkie Twycross, and I shall be a Ministry apparition for instructor for the next 12 weeks. I hope to be able to prepare you for your apparition test in this time." "Malfoy, be quiet and pay attention!" barked Professor McGonagall. Everybody looked around. Malfoy had flushed a dull pink. He looked furious as he stepped away from Crabbe, with whom he appeared to have been having a whispered argument. Harry glanced quickly at Snape, who also looked annoyed, though Harry strongly suspected that this was less because of Malfoy's rudeness than the fact that McGonagall had reprimanded one of his helpers. Yeah, I wouldn't put it by Snape. "I wish that many of you may be ready to take your test," Twycross continued, as though there had been no interruption. As you may know, it is usually impossible to apparate or to separate within Hogwarts. The headmaster has lifted this enchantment purely within the Great Hall for 1 hour, so as to enable you to practice. May I emphasize that you will not be able to operate outside of the walls of this hall, and that you would be unwise to try. I would like each of you to place yourselves now so that you have a clear 5 feet of space in front of you. There was a great scrambling and jostling as people separated, banged into each other, and ordered others out of their space. The heads of houses moved along the students, marshalling them into position and breaking up arguments. Harry, where are you going? Demanded Hermione, but Harry did not answer. He was moving quickly through the crowd, past the place where Professor Flitwick was making squeaky attempts to position a few Ravenclaws, all of whom who wanted to be near the front, past Professor Sprout, who was chipping the Hufflepuffs into line, until, by dodging around Ernie Macmillan, he managed to position himself right at the back of the crowd, directly behind Malfoy, who was taking advantage of the general upheaval to continue his argument with Crabbe, standing 5 feet away and looking mutinous. I don't know how much longer, right? Malfoy shot at him, oblivious to Harry standing right behind him. It's taking longer than I thought it would. Crabbe opened his mouth, but Malfoy appeared to second-guess what he was going to say. Look, it's none of your business what I'm doing, Crabbe. Malfoy will just twist your toe and keep a lookout. I'll tell my friends what I'm up to if I want them to keep a lookout for me, Harry said just loud enough for Malfoy to hear him. You probably would have been better to think that to yourself, Harry. Malfoy spun around on the spot, his hand flying to his wand. But at that precise moment, the 4 heads of house shouted, Quiet! And silence fell again. Malfoy turned slowly to face the front again. Thank you, said Twycross. Now then, he waved his wand. Old-fashioned wooden hoops suddenly appeared on the floor in front of every student. Wooden hoops. Maybe hula hoops? Embroidery hoops? You're leaving this a little bit vague, J.K. Rowling. The important thing to remember when operating are the 3 Ds, said Twycross. Destination, determination, deliberation. Step 1. Fix your mind firmly upon the desired destination, said Twycross. In this case, the interior of your hoop. Kindly concentrate upon that destination now. Everybody looked around furtively to check that everyone else was staring into their hoop, then hastily did as they were told. Harry grazed at the circular patch of dusty floor enclosed by his hoop, and tried hard to think of nothing else. This proved impossible, as he couldn't stop puzzling over what Malfoy was doing that needed lookouts. Step 2, said Twycross. Focus your determination to occupy the visualized space that you are yearning to enter. Let from your mind to every particle of your body. Harry glanced around surreptitiously, and little way to his left, Ernie Macmillan was contemplating his hoop so hard that his face had turned pink. It looked as though he was straining to lay a full-sized egg. Oh, I would have loved to see that in the films. Harry bit back a laugh and hastily returned to his gaze to his own hoop. Step 3, called Twycross, and only when I give the command, turn on the spot, feeling your way into nothingness, moving with deliberation. I'll make a man now. 1. Harry glanced around again. Lots of people were looking positively alarmed about being asked to operate so quickly. 2. Harry tried to fix his thoughts on his hoop again. He had already forgotten what 3 stood for. 3. Harry spun on the spot, lost balance, and nearly fell over. He was not the only one. The whole hall was suddenly full of staggering people. Neville was flat on his back. Ernie Macmillan, on the other hand, had done a kind of pirouetting leap into his hoop and looked momentarily thrilled until he caught sight of Dean Thomas roaring with laughter at him. Aw, don't let it get to you, Ernie. I love ballet, and I think it's beautiful that you have passions. Never mind, said Tycross dryly, who did not seem to have expected anything better. Adjust your hoops, please, and back to your original positions. The second attempt was no better than the first. The third was just as bad. Not until the fourth did anything exciting happen. There was a horrible screech of pain, and everybody looked around, terrified, to see Susan Puff wobbling in her hoop with her left leg still standing 5 feet away where she had started. The heads of house converged on her. There was a great bang and a puff of purple smoke, which cleared to reveal Susan sobbing, reunited with her leg but looking horrified. Splinting, or the separation of random body parts, said Wilkie Tycross dispassionately, occurs when the mind is insufficiently determined. Foreshadowing. You must concentrate continuously upon your destination and move without haste, but with deliberation, thus. Tycross stepped forward, turned gracefully on the spot with his arms outstretched, vanished in a swirl of robes, reappearing at the back of the hall. Remember the 3 Ds, he said. A dragon. 1, 2, 3. But an hour later, Susan splinting was still the most interesting thing that happened. Tycross did not seem disencouraged. Fastening his cloak at his neck, he merely said, Until next Saturday, everybody. And do not forget destination, determination, deliberation. With that, he waved his wand, vanishing the hoops, and walked out of the hall accompanied by Professor McGonagall. Talk broke out at once as people began moving toward the entrance hall. What did you do? Asked Ron, hurrying toward Harry. I think I felt something the last time I tried. A kind of tingling in my feet. I expect your trainers were too small, Ron, said a voice behind them, and Hermione stalked past, smirking. I didn't feel anything, said Harry, ignoring this interruption. But I don't care about that now. What do you mean you don't care? Don't you want to learn how to operate? Said Ron incredulously. I'm not fussed, really. I prefer flying, said Harry, glancing over his shoulder to see where Malfoy was, and speaking up as they came into the entrance hall. Look, hurry up, will you? There's something I want to do. Perplexed, Ron followed Harry back to the Gryffindor Tower at a run. They were temporarily detained by Peeves, who had jammed the door on the 4th floor shut and was refusing to let anyone pass until they set fire to their own hands. But Harry and Ron simply turned back and took one of their trusted shortcuts. Within 5 minutes, they were climbing through the portal. Are you going to tell me what we're doing then? Asked Ron, panting slightly. Up here, said Harry, and he crossed the common room and led the way through the door to the boys' staircase. Sometimes that's not easy to read. Their dormitory was, as Harry hoped, empty. He flung open his trunk and began to rummage in it, while Ron watched impatiently. Harry, Malfoy's using Crabbe and Goyle's Lookhouse. He was arguing with Crabbe just now. I just want to know. Aha! He had found it. A folded square of apparently blank parchment, which he now smoothed out and tapped it with the tip of his wand. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. What Malfoy is anyway. At once the Marauders map appeared on the parchment surface. Here was a detailed plan of every one of the castle's floors, and moving around it, the tiny black dots that signified each of the castle's occupants. Help me find Malfoy, said Harry urgently. He laid the map upon his bed, and he and Ron leaned over it, searching. There, said Ron after a minute. So, he's in the southern common room. Look, with Parkinson, Zabini, Crabbe, and Goyle. Harry looked down at the map, disappointed but rallied almost at once. I'm keeping an eye on him from now on, he said firmly. And the moment I see him lurking somewhere with Crabbe and Goyle, keeping watch outside, it'll be on with the old invisibility token off to find out what he's... He broke off as Neville entered the dormitory, bringing with him a strong smell of singed material, and began rummaging in his trunk for a fresh pair of pants. Despite his determination to catch Malfoy out, Harry had no luck at all over the next couple of weeks. Although he consulted the map as often as he could, sometimes making unnecessary visits to the bathroom between lessons to search it, he didn't want to see Malfoy anywhere suspicious. Admittedly, he spotted Crabbe and Goyle moving around the castle on their own more often than usual, sometimes remaining stationary in deserted corridors. But at these times, Malfoy was only nowhere near them, but impossible to locate on the map at all. This was most mysterious. Harry toyed with the idea that Malfoy was actually leaving the school grounds, but could not see how he could be doing it, given every high level of security now operating within the castle. He could only suppose that he was missing Malfoy amongst the hundreds of tiny black dots upon the map. As for the fact that Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle appeared to be going their different ways when they were usually inseparable, these things happened as people got older. Ron and Hermione, Harry reflected sadly, were living proof. Yeah, sometimes that does happen, unfortunately. February moved toward March with no change in the weather except that it became windy as well as wet. To general indignation, a sign went up on all common room notice boards that the next trip into Hogsmeade had been cancelled. Ron was furious. I would be too, considering these circumstances. It was on my birthday, he said. I was looking forward to that. Not a big surprise, though, is it? Said Harry. Not after what happened to Katie. She still had not returned from St. Mungo's. What was more, further disappearances had been reported in the Daily Prophet, including several relatives of students at Hogwarts. But now all I've got to look forward to is stupid apparition, said Ron grumpily. Big birthday treat. 3 lessons on an apparition was proving as difficult as ever, though a few more people had managed to sponge themselves. Frustration was running high, and there was a certain amount of ill feeling toward Wilkie Tycross and his 3Ds, which had inspired a number of nicknames for him, the wisest of which were Dog Breath and Dunhead. I don't think I want to know what the other ones are. Those 2 are the politest. Happy birthday, Ron, said Harry when they were woken on the 1st of March by Seamus and Dean leaving Silly for breakfast. Have a present. He threw the package across onto Ron's bed. where it joined a small pile of them that must, Harry assumed, have been delivered by house elves in the night. Ah, so that's what happens when you attend Hogwarts during your birthday. I've always wondered. Cheers, said Ron drowsily, and as he ripped off the paper, Harry got out of bed, opened his own trunk, and began rummaging in it for the Marauder's map, which he hid after every use. He chirped out half the contents of his trunk before he found it hiding beneath the rolled-up socks, in which he was still keeping his bottle of lucky potion, Felix Felicis. Aye, he murmured, taking it back to bed with him, tapping it quietly and murmuring, "I so I swear that I am up to no good," so that Neville, who was passing the foot of his bed at the time, would not hear. "Nice one, Harry," said Ron enthusiastically, waving the new pair of Quidditch keeper's gloves Harry had given him. Aw, such a thoughtful gift, Harry. If I were in this position, I would give him a wizard's chess set. For obvious reasons. And if you need a reminder or you don't know, go to Sorcerer's Stone. No problem, said Harry absent-mindedly, as he searched the Slytherin dormitory closely for Malfoy. Hey, I don't think he's in his bed. Ron did not answer. He was too busy unwrapping presents, every now and then with an exclamation of pleasure. I mean, yeah, I would probably do the same thing, Ron. Seriously good haul this year, he announced, holding up a heavy gold watch with odd symbols around the edge and tiny moving stars instead of hands. Ooh, I would have loved to have seen that in the films and won it in a replica prop. That would probably be my kind of watch. As you can tell, I'm more of a bracelet person. See what Mom and Dad got me? Blimey, I think I'll come of age next year too. Well, yeah, because in the Muggle world, 18 is of age. Cool, muttered Harry, sparing the watch a glance before peering more closely at the map. Where was Malfoy? He did not seem to be at the Slytherin table in the Great Hall, eating breakfast. He was nowhere near Snape, who was sitting in his study. He wasn't in any of the back rooms or in the hospital wing. Want one? Said Ron thickly, holding out a box of chocolate cauldrons. Those sound so good, provided they're not tainted. And for those who are curious, you're going to have to keep listening. No thanks, said Harry, looking up. Malfoy's gone again. Can't have done, said Ron, stuffing the second cauldron into his mouth as he slid out of bed to get dressed. Come on, if you don't know me up, you'll have to operate on an empty stomach. Might make it easier, I suppose. Ron looked thoughtfully at the box of chocolate cauldrons, then shrugged and helped himself to a third. I would probably do the same thing, Ron. I would probably do the same thing. Harry tapped the map with his wand, muttered, "Mischief managed," though it hadn't been, and got dressed, thinking hard. There had to be an explanation for Malfoy's periodic disappearances, but he simply could not think what it could be. The best way of finding out would be to tail him, but even with the invisibility cloak, this was an impractical idea. Harry had lessons, Quidditch practice, homework, and apparition. He could not follow Malfoy around school all day without his absence being remarked upon. Ready? He said to Ron. He was halfway to the dormitory door when he realized that Ron had not moved, but was leaning on his bedpost, staring out of the rain-washed window with a strangely unfocused look on his face. Ron? Breakfast. I'm not hungry. Harry stared at him. I thought you just said... Well, alright, I'll come down with you, said Ron, but I don't want to eat. Harry scrutinized him suspiciously. You've just eaten half a box of chocolate cauldrons, haven't you? It's not that. Ron sighed again. You wouldn't understand. Fair enough, said Harry, albeit puzzled, as he turned to open the door. Harry, said Ron suddenly. What? Harry, I can't stand it. You can't stand what? Asked Harry, now starting to feel definitely alarmed. Ron was rather pale and looked as though he was about to be sick. I can't stop thinking about her, said Ron hoarsely. Harry came at him. He had not expected this and was not sure he wanted to hear it. Friends they might be, but if Ron started calling Lavender Lav, he would have to put his foot down. Yeah, I would probably do the same thing too. Why does that stop you from having breakfast? Harry asked, trying to interject a note of common sense into the proceedings. I don't think she knows I exist, said Ron with a desperate gesture. She definitely knows you exist, said Harry, bewildered. She keeps knowing you, doesn't she? Ron blinked. Who are you talking about? Who are you talking about? Said Harry with an increasing sense that all reason had dropped out of the conversation. Mr. Fane, said Ron softly, and his whole face seemed to illuminate as though hit by a ray of pure sunlight. They stared at each other for almost a whole minute before Harry said, This is a joke, right? You're joking. Harry, I think I love her, said Ron in a strangled voice. Okay, said Harry, walking up to Ron to get a better look at the glazed eyes and the pallid complexion. Okay, say that again with a straight face. I love her, repeated Ron breathlessly. Have you seen her hair? It's so black, shiny, and silky. And her eyes, the big, dark eyes, and her... This is really funny and everything, said Harry impatiently. The joke's over, all right? Drop it. He turned to leave. He had got 2 steps toward the door when a crashing blow hit him on the right ear. Staggering, he looked around. Ron's fist was drawn right back. His face was contorted with rage. He was about to strike again. Harry reacted instinctively. His wand was out of his pocket, and the incantation sprang to mind without conscious thought. Let it go first! Ron yelled as his heel was wrenched upon a board once more. He dangled helplessly, upside down, his ropes hanging off him. What's that for? Harry bellowed. You insulted her, Harry! You said it was a joke! Shouted Ron, who was slowly turning purple in the face as all the blood rushed to his head. This is insane, said Harry. What's gone into... And then he saw the box lying open on Ron's bed, and the truth hit him with the force of a stampeding troll. Where did you get those chocolate cauldrons? They were a birthday present, shouted Ron, revolving slowly in mid-air as he struggled to get free. I offered you one, didn't I? You just picked them up off the floor, didn't you? They fell off my bed, all right? Let me go. They didn't fall off your bed, you rat, don't you understand? They were mine. I took them out of my trunk when I was looking for the map. They're the chocolate cauldrons from Mills gave me for Christmas, and they're all spiked with love potion. But only one word of this seemed to have registered with Ron. Romelda, he repeated. Did you say Romelda? Harry, you know her. Can you introduce me? Harry stared at the dangling Ron, whose face now looked tremendously hopeful, and fought a strong desire to laugh. A part of him, the part closest to his throbbing right ear, was quite keen on the idea of letting Ron down and watching him run amok until the effects of the potion were off. But on the other hand, they were supposed to be friends. Ron had not been himself when he had attacked, and Harry thought he would deserve another punching if Ron permitted Ron to declare undying love for Romilda Vane. Yeah, I'll introduce you, said Harry, thinking fast. I'm going to let you down now, okay? He sent Ron crashing back to his floor. His ear did hurt quite a lot. But Ron simply bounded to his feet again, grinning. She'll be at Slughorn's office, said Harry confidently, leading the way to the door. Why would she be in there? Asked Ron anxiously, hurrying to keep up. She has extra potions lessons with him, said Harry, advancing wildly. Maybe I could ask if I could have them with her, said Ron eagerly. Great idea, said Harry. Lavender was waiting beside the portal, a complication Harry had not foreseen. You're late, Ron, she pouted. I got you a birthday. Leave me alone, said Ron impatient. Harry's going to introduce me to Romilda Vane. And without another word to her, he pushed his way out of the portal. Harry tried to make an apologetic face to Lavender, but it might have turned out simply amused, because she looked more offended than ever as the fat lady's son swung shut behind them. Harry had been slightly worried that Slughorn might be at breakfast, but he entered his office door at the first knock wearing a green velvet dressing gown and matching nightcap. Ooh, how beautiful. Wonder what type of green, though. Considering it's velvet, I think it's safe to say emerald, or maybe forest. What do you guys think? Looking rather bleary-eyed. Harry, he mumbled, this is very early for a call. I turned in sick late on a Saturday. Professor, I'm really sorry to disturb you, said Harry as quietly as possible, where Ron stood on tiptoe, attempting to see past Slughorn into his room. But my friend swallowed his up potion by mistake. You couldn't make him an antidote, could you? I'd take him to Madame Pomfrey, but we're not supposed to have any wasted special places. And, awkward questions. I'd have thought you'd have whipped him up a remedy, Harry. An expert potioneer like you? Asked Slughorn. Said Harry, still somewhat distracted by the fact that Ron was now elbowing him in the ribs in an attempt to force his way into the room. Well, I never mixed an antidote for that potion, sir, and by the time I get it right, Ron might have done something serious. Helpfully, Ron chose this moment to moan. I can't see her, Harry. Is he hiding her? Was this potion within date? Asked Slughorn, now eyeing Ron with professional interest. They can strengthen, the longer they're kept. That would explain a lot, panted Harry, now positively wrestling with Ron to keep him from knocking Slughorn over. It's his birthday, Professor, he added importantly. All right, come in then, come in, said Slughorn relenting. I've got the necessary here in my bag. It's not a difficult antidote. Ron burst through the door into Slughorn's overheated, crowded study, tripped over a tasseled footstool, regained his balance by seizing Harry around the neck, and muttered, She didn't say that, did she? She's not here yet, said Harry, watching Slughorn opening his potion kit and adding a few pinches of this and that to a small crystal bottle. That's good, said Ron fervently. How do I look? Very handsome, said Slughorn smoothly, handing Ron a glass of clear liquid. Drink that up. It's tonic for the nerves. Keep you calm when she arrives, Brilliant, said Ron eagerly, and he gulped the antidote down noisily. Harry and Slughorn watched him. For a moment, Ron beamed at them. Then very slowly his grin sagged and vanished, to be replaced by an expression of utmost horror. Back to normal, then, said Harry, grinning. Slughorn chuckled. Thanks a lot, Professor. Don't mention it, don't mention it, said Slughorn, as Ron collapsed into a nearby armchair, looking devastated. Pick me up. That's what he needs. Slughorn continued, now bustling over to a table loaded with drinks. But what butterbeer, one last bottle of this oak matured mead. I'll take butterbeer, please, Slughorn. Meant to get that to Dumbledore for Christmas. Ah, well, he shrugged. He can't miss what he's never had. Why don't we open it now and celebrate Mr. Weasley's birthday? Nothing like a fine spirit to chase away the pangs of disappointed love. He chortled again, and Harry joined in. This was the first time he had found himself almost alone with Slughorn since his disastrous first attempt to extract the true memory from him. Perhaps if he could just keep Slughorn in a good mood, perhaps if they got enough of the oak matured mead. There you are, then, said Slughorn, handing Harry and Ron a glass of mead each before raising his own. Well, a very happy birthday, Ralph. Ralph, we miss you. And for context, Ralph was a cat in my infancy that would literally protect me if anyone tried to go close to me. I like to think he's still protecting me in the spirit. But moving on. Ron, whispered Harry. But Ron did not appear to be listening to the toast, had already thrown the mead into his mouth and swallowed it. There was 1 second, hardly more than a heartbeat, in which Harry knew there was something terribly wrong, and Slughorn, it seemed, did not. And may you have many more! Ron! Ron dropped his glass. He half rose from his chair, and then crumpled, his extremities jerking uncontrollably. Foam was dribbling from his mouth, and his eyes were bulging from their sockets. Professor! Harry bellowed. Do something! But Slughorn seemed paralyzed by shock. Ron twitched and choked. His skin was turning blue. What's blood? Spluttered Slughorn. Harry leapt over a low table and sprinted towards Slughorn's open potion kit, pulling out jars and pouches, while the terrible sound of Ron's gargling breath filled the room. Then he found it, the shriveled kidney-like stone he had taken from him in potions. He hurtled back to Ron's side, wrenched open his jaw, and thrust the Lozar into his mouth. Ron gave a great shudder, a rattling gasp, and his body became limp and still. And that is the end of this chapter. Join me next week for Chapter 19, Elf Tales. Until then, bye!